Our next guest is a UFC legend who's arguably one of the toughest fighters to step foot into the UFC octagon. He's now a host on Unfiltered MMA Radio on ESPN every Monday and has his autobiography, The Crippler, Cage Fighting and My Life on the Edge, set to come out early next year. Chris Leben, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Right on, man. Thanks for having me.
You know, Chris, it's our pleasure. It's great to have you back on. And obviously lots has changed since the last time we spoke. Like we mentioned, you're now doing an awesome job hosting MMA radio. How do you enjoy being on the other side of the coin?
You know what? I'm honestly, I love it because, like I tell people all the time, the only thing faster in my hands is my mouth. So, I don't mind, getting paid just to talk shit. It's not too bad of a deal, I could always end up having a real job, which would be terrible. The show's been great. We've had different guests. We've been on, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, and we've had different guests every show. And now it's gotten to the point where, even fighters and different people are reaching out to us already. So, ratings are through the roof. Show's going great. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Don't take any of our listeners anytime too soon, Chris. Now, it's crazy. It's crazy for us to say this because time just flies by so quickly. But just a number of days ago, it was actually the 10-year anniversary of the iconic Stephan Bonnar and Forrest Griffin TUF 1 finale. Now, obviously, you were a big part of that first season. Looking back on it all, are you amazed at how much it's meant for MMA fans, the first season of TUF, and how much it's done for MMA? And did you realize that you'd be such a big part of history when you first stepped into that TUF house?
Oof, man, that's a big question. Obviously hindsight's 2020. But at the time, I was living in the moment. You know what I mean? I just, we didn't even know, how the show was going to do or anything. And then it aired. It was a huge success. And it was kind of just a wild ride. But looking back, obviously, yeah, man. Without the Ultimate Fighter, without that first season. I truly don't believe that, Dana White, the Petitas, the UFC would be where it's at today or even close to it.
Obviously, The Ultimate Fighter Season 1, and it's been in the history books for a while now, and obviously you're saying it was a bit of a wild ride, but, now that we've been able to see the seasons, we sort of know what to expect, but you guys were the original cast. Leading up into that house, what was going through your mind, when it first started, when you first sort of, before you even entered the house, did you expect what was going to happen?
I had no clue. I was a 22, 23-year-old kid, you know what I mean? And, honestly, we didn't even know if the show was going to air or not. It wasn't like we had Burger King as a sponsor and Gillette razors. And, the show wasn't established in any way. So it was, nobody really knew, what was going on or what to expect. And I think even they changed the format on us a couple times as the show progressed, and it was just really, we were in uncharted territory.
Yeah, no, it was certainly a very special season. Now, Chris, Chuck Mindahol actually recently published a fantastic article on Jason Thacker, more commonly known as Strange Brew. His story is a bit of a sad one, and his UFC career was pretty much over in an instant. When you were on The Ultimate Fighter with him, did you feel like he was a sacrificial lamb and that he was there to be made an example of by the more experienced fighters?
Yeah, it kind of sucks. I mean, I took a look at the article. We talked about it on my show. And truthfully, he wasn't at the level of the rest of the guys on the show. You know what I mean? They brought him in as reality shows. They like to have those contrasting characters. You know what I'm saying? So, I think in a lot of ways, yeah, he was a sacrificial lamb. But looking at the article and stuff, older, I hope a little more wise, a little more experienced, yeah, I know I was a little bit of a dickhead on the show, but, I just really appreciated that, he doesn't have any resentments, his life is where it's at, and he's fully accepted it. And, he doesn't hold anything against anybody that was on the show, me in particular, which just makes me go, man, what a real person, what a stand-up guy, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, and that's a very positive part about it. It's very admirable. In that same article, I'm sure you read, Thacker explained how after the show, because of how, badly he did, he would regularly get beat up in bars by groups of guys and MMA fighters. What are your thoughts on that? Would you ever expect MMA fans or fighters to do things like that?
No, not at all, man. It's stupid, I mean, yeah, it's God, it's a tough deal, but I mean, it's a cutthroat world, Yeah, I must have. We talked about the article on the show, but I must have missed that part. I mean, Canada's a little crazy too. It's its own beast, So there's the fans in Canada for some reason are just they're just over the top, man. They love the sport, But that's I might have peed on his bed, but I certainly wouldn't have beat him up.
Yeah.
That being said, if any of your listeners, he's got that. Jason Thacker didn't do it, but I know the guy that wrote the article set up that GoFundMe account. Because I guess his parents aren't doing the best. He's trying to take care of both of them. So if anybody's listening wants to send him a couple bucks and help the guy out, man, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually believe it closed yesterday, and they raised pretty much the whole $13,000 they were aiming to raise.
Did? Okay.
So
Wow.
it's awesome. Yeah, it's great to see. Now, speaking of TUF 1, not many fighters from the first season are still active. Just wondering, have you had a chance to watch Josh Koscheck's last two fights or last few fights, and what did you think? Because for a lot of, obviously, MMA journalists, the common opinion is Josh may be sticking around for a bit too long.
Man, the sport has progressed so much. Josh came in as a natural athlete and an amazing wrestler, and he was able to do so much in the sport. That being said, he's got his clothing line. He's got a lot of stuff going for him. Yeah, I mean, what else does he have to prove? Let it go. I mean, there comes a point in everybody's life when you got to say, I think I've proven everything I can, and I've pushed it as far as I can go. And in my opinion, it's better to burn out than fade away.
The first few Ultimate Fighters have been, they were really awesome. They're all classic. I'd say probably maybe the first 10 seasons. However, some of the more recent ones have been a bit average, and it seems MMA fans may be a little bit over it. Why do you think the decline in people caring about Ultimate Fighter has occurred?
Well, I think, one, you have to remember, that first season, everybody, excluding, of course, Jason Thacker, was at a competition, was at a level to where we were already knocking on the UFC's door, I mean, and it's hard kind of for them to go out and find top level fighters like that, and enough to fill a house, a couple seasons a year, so there's that. And then also I think because now, the characters that we did have on the original show, and none of us knew what we were in for, and I think now some of these kids that are going on to the Ultimate Fighter have been raised on the Ultimate Fighter, and so they kind of they know what's asked of them, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to act. And unfortunately, when you know what's expected and you know what people want, you just don't do as good of a job, I think, as when you're being creative and being your own individual.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to see another comebacks series for TUF. I think that would be awesome, especially with all the people always getting cut. There'd be a lot of great names. Now, Chris, recently another MMA legend in Mark Coleman was in a very difficult situation. I know you probably read about it with his health. We actually had him on the show a number of weeks ago to promote his GoFundMe account. My question to you is, do you think that legends such as The Hammer, who have given so much to companies like the UFC, should be afforded some sort of pension for these difficult situations that really sort of, I suppose, threaten their health, and this money is really, for them to live their life after the UFC?
Absolutely, I think so. I know that I'll just go ahead and say, a life in fighting is not your average career. and sure, none of us are going to have, 25 years in the UFC and then retire. But, even these guys that change the sport, or, in my case, and a lot of the other guys on the original Ultimate Fighter, we spent nearly a decade in the sport, you sacrifice a lot. We all gave a lot. And without these people, Mark Coleman, for example, man, without that guy, what would the sport be? That guy was one of the founders, one of the people that made the sport. And now that the sport is doing so well, I really don't understand why there wouldn't be.
And fighter pay is a topic that has been brought up again in the news recently, and I was actually discussing the topic with a colleague recently, about locker room bonuses and the amount that fighters are paid, and, even in the biggest organizations, and how many of them are ending up with, not really that much. I'm just wondering, in your opinion, do you think that a fighter, let's say, for example, an average top 15 fighter in the UFC could retire off of a 10-year career?
That's a tough one, man, because honestly, Koscheck, for example, just did an amazing job with his money.
Yeah.
The rest of us, I can't say the same for myself, but ultimately, I was talking to Chael Sonnen when I did his podcast about it, and it's, people don't realize, they say, oh, he made 50 or 80 grand for this fight. Well, out of that 50 or 80 grand, once you take your coaches, your gym, taxes, a fighter's lucky to end up with 40% of it. I mean, honestly, and then he's got to pay for his food, his nutrition, his, everything in life out of that. And when you're doing that, it's hard to put away. It's also, as a fighter, when you step into the cage, usually you get X to show, double that to win, and maybe a bonus. That makes it quite hard to balance your checkbook.
Yeah, certainly right, Chris. Now, I just want to go back into your career. A highlight in your career was the awesome finish of Wanderlei Silva at UFC 132. You obviously spoke to us about how much of a fan of Silva you were. Just take us back into that moment. What was going through your mind when you were doing the stare down with the infamous Wanderlei Silva, especially as a fan, and then take us into the moment when you knocked him out. It must have been a surreal feeling.
I was scared to death. I remember in particular, one of the great things was, that fear really motivated me through the entire training camp. And then I remember at weigh-ins, he kind of gave me a smirk, almost like he just like he didn't have respect, like I didn't deserve to be stepping into the ring with him. And in my case, that really fired me up going into the fight. So obviously, I came out. Then they killed the lights. They played his legendary song, of course. There's no way to really describe to people how much stimulation is going on at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like you're overstimulated. Like there's no way to explain it. It's like, it's a sold out house. I'm fighting my legend, my hero. It's for me it was surreal. I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, we're getting goosebumps just listening to it. Wanderlei, he's going through some tough times now. He seems to be stuck in the UFC, and he doesn't look like he'll likely fight again due to avoiding that drug test out of competition. What are your thoughts on this situation?
Once again, man, the guy's got a great gym. He's got kids in the sport. He's there's so much that he can offer the world. Post career. I don't see why he needs to fight again, honestly, I mean, who doesn't want to take a Wanderlei Silva seminar? You know what I'm saying? Who doesn't want to learn from that guy or train at his gym, I wish some of these guys would realize that, you don't have to, you can't define yourself as being a fighter your entire life. I mean, it's a phase, and everything in this life is finite, and that's something that I've had to come to grips with, is that, we all grow old, and then eventually, we all die, and that our fighting career is a very short window in our lifespan. You know,
Yes.
so you really have to focus on what's next. You know, and I think for him that should be his goal, is to focus on what's next, because obviously there's even if he did fight, how many more fights would he have? You know, and that being said, what's he going to do after he is done?
Yeah, and it's good because he's actually advocating for a lot of fighters. He's been on the show a number of times, so hopefully we see more from him in the future. Now, while on the subject of drug tests, you obviously had an infamous fight with Anderson Silva. It was a bit quick. It was still a very interesting fight. Now Anderson is in the headlines, obviously for testing positive for steroids. Just wondering, what did you think when you heard the news?
I was blown away. Really, I was. Anderson's, such a, natural athlete and everything else. But I mean, I can understand coming off an injury like that, and with his age and where he's at. That being said, God, I know I sound like a broken record, but I mean, if he would have just went out and retired on, after breaking his leg and everything else, and said, look, this is a catastrophic injury. I was the best fighter of all time. The world was his oyster at that point, and God, I know I fucked up, but it's definitely a little bit damaging to his legacy, I guess, and and I know he's one of the nicest guys. Every time he's so respectful, he's great, and and I understand what it is to want to still compete and to want to try to keep your body healthy. But that was I guess in particular, getting caught was a big fuck up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Everybody kind of always looked at me one way, but in the world's eyes, Anderson Silva was just a whole nother beast. And that really did a lot more damage, I think, than if somebody like me were to get caught.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Chris, as we mentioned in the intro, your book looks set to be released. You have so many awesome stories. Was it difficult for you to sit down and get this stuff on paper? And what was the process like for you?
It was really hard. Luckily, I've got a great ghostwriter, Daniel Pattikin, and just somebody that actually, he's been through his own struggles. So I was able to relate to him. And I think without that, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish what we accomplished on the book, because I really, really tried to keep it as real and as raw as possible. I really want people to see, what was really going on. I tried to candy coat it. Obviously there's some some names and stuff that I can't really throw out there, because those people still have a lot going on in their lives and this and that. That being said, Daniel was great to work with. In a lot of aspects, it was therapeutic, because I had to go over and kind of come to terms with a lot of stuff that I had more or less suppressed, writing the book really helped me realize how much I have grown, because those, right, the first few years, I'm story after story, I like to think of myself as a good person, but I'm going, fuck, man, I'm a dick. When I'm going back and I'm reading this stuff, and then I had to come to terms with, well, hey, Chris, look, this is where you came from. This is what you went through, and this is where you are now, And I mean, even now, don't get me wrong, I'm far from a normal person. I still have, I work my ass off. I'm at Victory MMA and Fitness, the biggest gym in San Diego, and I've got an amazing fight team. 29-3, by the way, since I've been coaching there.
Wow.
And then the book, the radio show. I've got all this stuff going. So it's really good for me to be able to realize how much progression I have made, even though, in America, for some reason, we seem to think, once you turn 18 years old, you're an adult, and then there's no more maturing. Well, I've really realized that I'm going to continue to mature and grow my entire life.
Yeah, and that's a great way of looking at it, Chris. I think a lot of us are coming to that realization as well. Now, we know there are a lot of crazy stories that people want to buy the book for, but just as a little taste, as a little preview for the fans listening right now, can you share a little bit of one crazy Chris Leben story from the book to get the fans excited and go and pre-order it now?
And just to let you know, Chris, you've already told us the Brian Stan story of what happened before the Brian Stan fight.
So we want a new one.
Okay. What about the Cote one was what sold the writer on writing the book?
Yeah, tell us that one. We don't know.
Okay, well, he called me and he wasn't sure if he wanted to write it, and I just gave him an idea, so basically, before I fought Patrick Cote, like the day before weigh-ins, I go out. My brother works in Vegas. He works at one of those, they sell the foot-long margaritas. Anyways, I get blackout drunk. I'm hanging out with these Irish guys. I end up going into the bathroom at the Hard Rock and kicking every bathroom stall down. At which point security arrests me. Security guards standing there. The Irish guys are going, "Do you know who this guy is?" Da da da. I give the guy every penny in my pocket, bribe him like $500 or whatever, to let me out of the handcuffs. Lets me out of the handcuffs. I run to my room. Next morning, I wake up in a pile of vomit. I think it's 8 in the morning because I set my old cell phone at the time, the alarm. So I think it's 8 in the morning. It's actually freaking noon. I'm 2 hours late for my photo shoot. I call my ex and she's going, "Yeah, I went to the gym. I did this, I did that." I'm going, "Wow, before 8 in the morning?" And then she says, "What do you mean it's noon?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I know that, And so then I remember I'd go down and do my photo shoot, and the lady's saying she smells alcohol somewhere, and ended up getting through that. Obviously, I couldn't eat or drink now because it was time to make weight. So I had to cut weight, completely hungover, and went out and fought Patrick Cote. And I don't know if you guys remember that fight, but that was it was just a war.
Wow. Now, Chris, we're going to finish off the interview with a thing we like to call the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. Basically, a bunch of fun questions to go through and just to sort of have a bit of fun. So are you ready?
I remember this. All right, let's see how I do.
All right, here we go. Now, first question, how's the body feeling for the crippler right now?
As long as I take care of it, it's okay. But if I'm not eating right or not getting my sleep and my rest, it hurts. I've got aches and pains that I know are never going to go away.
Now we've got the fans' help in this tap out round. So some of the fan ones, right? The Brown Ranger wants to know, why did you paint your hair red?
Years ago, it was I started doing the hair and the nails. I think my first fight or my first 2 fights, it was actually bleach blonde, but I figured, fuck man, I need a way for these promoters to recognize me. So that's really what it was about. It was about getting people to remember me.
Now, this one's from a fan called Blunt Force Trauma. He goes, I heard Carla Alexander called you out at a party or a club when you were in Oahu. Can you tell us about what happened?
Which guy?
Carla Alexander. I believe he's a surfer, a famous surfer over there in Hawaii.
Oh, Carla. Yeah, it's funny actually, man. Me and Carla are boys. I don't know if you know his name. I don't know if you guys know who he is or how much I can really say. But let's just say, I trained him because somebody called me and asked me to, and I couldn't refuse him. And then, he did call me out. He does have a little bit of a short temper, or more or less, we had some words. But a week later, I was in the hospital sitting next to him taking pictures with 12 kids with cancer for his charity. So
Wow.
Just another one of those guys that's like, it's fighters, big heart, great guy. Just there's a lot of personality in that guy. Let's just put it that way. He's a good guy, but there's a lot of personality in him.
Now, Chris, in your fighting days, you could take a lot of punches. Did people ever bring up the episode of The Simpsons where Homer has a helmet-like skull and takes on Drederick Tatum to describe your toughness?
No, actually. I never heard that one, but it's pretty good.
Now, this next question's from Hot Rhythm. He'd like to know, can you share some stories of training from back in your Team Quest days in Oregon, or any kind of stuff that went on in the camp that fans would have never heard of?
God, man, it's, back then we just did not know how to train. I mean, obviously Randy and Matt Lindland were running the practices, and when you train wrestling, you train 100%, so, we were training 100% with 4-ounce gloves on. And back then it was the old, the only gloves we had were like the Century ones or the Billy Blanks ones where you had to cut the bar out of the bottom, But I mean, you can just imagine, guys getting knocked out every day, and just, we drag them up to the side, they'd wake up and start training again. Now I realize as a coach, like, God, a kid gets knocked out, he's done for the day. It wasn't like that at Team Quest.
Wow.
You get knocked out as soon as you're good to move around again, you were back in there doing rounds, and then of course, me and Ed Herman, he started about a month or two after me at Team Quest, so we were always best friends / worst rivals, our entire career. So there was a lot of fuck yous and a lot of rounds that turned a little more real.
Wow. Now, Chris, we've seen that you've been doing some auditions. Can we expect to see the Crippler in any movies in 2015?
Well, actually, I'm in a great documentary by a guy named Chris Bell, which is coming out. I don't know if you guys saw it. He did the Bigger, Faster, Stronger documentary.
Yep.
He did that one. Well, his next one is called Prescription Thugs, talking about prescription pain pill abuse and professional athletes. I'm really excited to be in this documentary because I just hope that it really gets the point across. And I love the way Chris does stuff. He presents the truth behind issues. He doesn't candy cone it or paint it the way the media wants to look at it. He lets you know the facts, and some people like it, some people hate it. That being said, I'm also on the Kingdom program, with starring one of the Jonas Brothers.
Yep.
I did a couple episodes for them, and I know they got a bunch more funded, so I'm hoping to get some more parts in there. Other than that, I've read for a few things, but I've got my coaching, my radio show, everything else. Acting for me is like I really enjoy it. I kind of feel like I've been lying to people my whole life, so I should be a pretty good actor by now.
Well, you actually reminded me. You played the guy in Kingdom that wouldn't pay his gym membership, didn't you?
Yeah.
Chris, what's going on? That's just what's going on. And they were chasing you around for it. I'm like, do you guys know who this guy is? He will knock Nick Jonas out in a second.
Well, it was funny, because I'm playing a broke MMA fighter. It's not exactly that far outside the box. What I'm saying. So, but actually, really fun to do that show. It's great. I'll be honest, man. It's a lot easier to do acting and fake hit people than it is to fight in the UFC and you get paid.
Well, you get different fighters saying different things. Hoist Gracie was saying how hard it was for him to act as opposed to just getting in there and fighting. But finally, for fans excited about your book, describe it to them in a few words why they can't miss this one, Chris.
This isn't a book about an MMA fighter. This is a book about just a fucking crazy life and just a struggle and just so much just different stuff. Like, I can't ever even explain why every time in my life, my whole life, just crazy things happen to me, regardless of if it's in the cage or outside of the cage. There's just never been a dull moment in my life. And I mean, sometimes fact is more crazy than fiction. And I'm telling you, if you read this book, you're gonna be blown away. Like, and I'm hoping people go, wow, he went through that, he did that. That's that's way more amazing than any of those punches I saw him take and not get knocked out.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a very, very interesting book. We won't miss it. Guys, check out Chris on Twitter at Crippler UFC. Pre-order The Crippler, Cage Fighting, and My Life on the Edge on Amazon now. And make sure to listen to him every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. PST on ESPN Unfiltered MMA Radio. Chris, it's been a pleasure, and it's great to see that you got so many great projects.
And they can just go to unfilteredmma.com and watch any of the past episodes. Check it out, man. And I appreciate it. Thank you guys for letting me be on. Always love your show. So right on.